Good morning. Welcome to our Conversations program. My name's Emily Butler. I'm the Conversations Curator at Basel. We're delighted this morning to be celebrating the rich career of artist Ming Smith, and we will be celebrating it with three of her gallerists that have been working very closely with her. So we're delighted to be hosting Karen Jenkins-Johnsons, the director of Jenkins-Johnsons Gallery, Georgia Louvry, who's the director of Pippi Holdsworth Gallery, Nicola Vassell, the founder of Nicola Vassell Gallery, and we're really thrilled that Drew Sawyer, who's a curator at the Brooklyn Museum, will be moderating this panel. They will be discussing her early collaborations, how they came to work together, and the journeys that they've been taking to work together. The conversation will last approximately 50 minutes, and we'll have 10 minutes of questions at the end, so feel free to put your hand up, and we'll be passing a mic around. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Drew, and please do give our speakers a very warm round of applause and enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for being here this morning. It's truly an honor and pleasure to be on stage with these four people, especially Ming. Ming and I had the pleasure of working together when I was at the Columbus Museum of Art in Ohio, where Ming grew up, so it was particularly special to bring her work to the institution. I'm excited for this conversation today. I figured since I don't know to the degree to which everyone is familiar with Ming's work, we could just start with Ming, just telling us a little bit about how you came to photography as a practice when you moved to New York in the 1970s. Do you want to?
Well, I have to say that this is a real surreal moment for me. This is surreal. My grandmother, she had a washing machine, and but she still washed her clothes with the tub, and she had a dryer, and she taught me how to hang the clothes on the line, even though, and that's a surreal moment, right? To think of that. And I remember when she said something about, she said she wasn't going to fly, and she decided she would fly, and afterwards she said, oh, that was really great. She said, and they even fed me. Well, that seems surreal, right, to me, to think of that time. And this time, like, we have cell phones. My parents, they passed when the cell phones started to become popular. And I remember saying, oh, wow, you could see someone, talk to them on the phone. That's a surreal moment. And so for me, as an artist, to be here on stage, when I decided, I never really committed to say I was an artist, because that was like saying to your parents or other people that it was like holding hands with poverty. And so now being here and being honored, and 3 gallerists, and I even have another one in Texas, it's a surreal moment for me. And to answer your question, as a photographer, my father was a photographer, and he always did it. And so when I was in kindergarten, I borrowed my mother's Brownie camera, and I took photographs of my kindergarten class. So that's how I started.
So you were a photographer all along. Yeah.
I didn't claim it, but yeah, I was.
And I mean, so obviously you moved to New York, you do modeling as well, but you start practicing as a photographer. And even in the 1970s, your work is acquired by the Museum of Modern Art. So almost immediately, right, you receive recognition. But I think, of course, you know, the photo world, the art worlds look very different in the 1970s in terms of networks of support, especially thinking from the commercial side. So I know, obviously, you were involved in Kamwingi workshops, so maybe you could talk about what sort of support networks were there for you in the 1970s, and then I think it will be a good segue to talk about sort of other networks of support that are around you now.
So at that time, I discovered Kamagi actually photography as an art form, because I went to a studio to have my photographs taken of me because I was part-time modeling at the time. I wasn't really like the model type because I was short and I don't know, I just didn't have the personality. At least that's how I felt then. And they told me it was $100 an hour. Now, my father graduated from Ohio State with honors. He was a pharmacist. He worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and he made $100 a week. So $100 for an hour, that was like phenomenal money. I'm just trying to give you the context of what that would be like. So for $100 an hour to model, like, why not, right? And so when I was going on this go-see, I overheard two photographers. There was a partition, and I heard them debating on if photography was an art form or not. And also they were talking about, was it just nostalgia photography? And at that time, photography was not, there was a big debate on if it was an art form or not. So that's a long time ago, but there were photographers like Bresai and Imogen Cunningham and, you know, Robert Frank that I learned through photography about, well, they mentioned, I think, Cartier-Bresson, and one of the members, Lou Draper, no, it was Eugene Smith, he printed for them. And so, so when I heard that, and then when I joined Kamagi, the photographer, I met the group, and then Lou Draper, he asked me if I would join because he thought my photographs were good. But yeah, so photography as an art form, that's when I really knew that there was a possibility of being an artist through photography. It wasn't commercially, like, photography, or as any artist, I mean, like with the younger generation, they, you know, like, oh, I want to have a show, I want to do a talk, I want to, but there was none of that, at least for me. And now, this is 2022, and here we are. And I just want to say one more thing, that, so, as I was talking about surrealism, and time is very surreal, that who knows, our children, our grandchildren might say, well, let's go to Art Mars or Art Moon. They'll be going there, and it's an everyday thing, whereas this is like a surreal moment for me.
Do you want to talk about, you selected a few images, I don't know. I mean, one of the things, you know, you've become known for is your use of blur, and also talking about photography and time and sort of surrealism. So I'm curious just how you came to the sort of embrace the blur.
Well, subconscious is so ahead of your mind, and I found that a lot of artists, the way they discovered things, not just artists, but scientists and pioneers, it comes from your subconscious. And so when I was photographing, I was just photographing. I wasn't thinking of the invisible man or the blur or anything. It just came out of photographing. And it's like with anything, you know, you improvise. And so with photography, the elements, you deal with timing, the light, movement, and you try to capture that moment. And when you work from yourself, something will come out of that. Like I always tell all the young artists to really work from themselves, from their gut, and not try to copy other artists. You know, that's a guide. but it's like working from yourself. But
well, I want to switch things a little bit, and I'll start with Karen. Since I'm going to go sort of in order of when each gallery started working with Ming. And so first, obviously, you've had a gallery for several decades. You started working with Ming in 2019?
2018.
2018.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you obviously have a long career experience of working with photographers. You work with Gordon Parks in the estate now. So maybe just first how you came to collaborate with Ming. And then I'm also curious about your specific approach of doing solo presentations at both photo-specific fairs like APAD, but also contemporary art fairs like Art Basel.
Yes. How do I get to my section?
So you can just...
there we go.
There we go.
Okay.
And I can control this view if that's easier.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. So Ming and I first came to know Ming's work in 2018 in Solvenation when it came to the Brooklyn Museum. And then I loved the work, it spoke with me, and I loved the sensibility. I worked with the Gordon Parks Foundation, and I worked with Roy DeCarava for about 11 years, the DeCarava Archives. I went to an event at the Gordon Parks Foundation in Pleasantville, and Peter Kuhnhart Jr., who was the executive director there, said, "Karen, you need to go speak with Ming." So when the dinner happened, I beelined it to Ming. And we had a wonderful conversation. I met her and Mingus, her son and manager. And then we started talking, we started meeting, and then we started strategizing. I started asking her, what are your goals? And we started figuring out how to attain those goals. And the best way, in my opinion, to get an artist out there very quickly is through art fairs. And so that was the main goal. And so we started with Frieze New York in 2019. And by a lot of fighting and, pushing, we got into Frieze, and that's a whole other story. But Franklin Sermons had a section called Just Above Midtown, and Ming was involved with Linda Goodbryant. And so Franklin said, let's come on and let's bring Ming to Just Above Midtown section. We did the installation, and we won the Frieze stand prize through a team collaboration with Ming and Mingus and I and our team. We put together a beautiful booth, and we're laughing because there's a process here, and this is all about relationships. So we were quite surprised and pleasantly surprised. On the panel was Thelma Golden and Nancy Spector, and the head of Frieze was there, and my team. And this allowed us to start the conversation, building the foundation. Because at that time, people weren't aware of Ming, especially in the contemporary painting sector of the art world. And so that laid the foundation. Then Mingus and I sweet-talked Victoria Sadal into getting us into Frieze Masters. They had originally waitlisted us, and I had a very strong conversation with them, and we got into Frieze Masters. And Frieze Masters is in London. These photos here are still with Frieze New York. This is Dawu Bey, who's a dear friend of Ming. Dawu Bey actually helped assist me in pricing of Ming's work, learning how to price an artist's work when you're bringing it out. The rollout of it is very important. And so he gave me great guidance in that. So we rolled out the work, went to Frieze Masters. She got a 2-page spread in the Financial Times. And in the Financial Times, if you don't know that, that's an international newspaper that really helped build Ming's brand. And from Frieze Masters, we went to Paris Photo. At Paris Photo, we continued to meet curators. We have put Ming in 10 institutions, including the Getty, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Baltimore Museum, Princeton, several institutions. And this is how you build legacy, is through museums. And this is also how you build the price structure of an artist. People want to know that the work is sustainable and that there's longevity to it, and that is how we did it. And at our presentations, we show both vintage work and contemporary modern prints. Both the prints are current modern prints, and the vintage work are primarily taken around the time of the negative. That distinguishes vintage work from a later print. We, here at Paris, we were having a dialogue with people that didn't know Ming, so again, this was laying the foundation. Then we went on and continued to show her at contemporary fairs.
Great. Yeah, you've accomplished a lot in just a few years, and it's truly amazing. So I want to shift things now to Georgia and ask you a little bit about how you started working with Ming. You know, I'm really curious. I mean, Karen talked a little bit about bringing Ming's work to Frieze, but the sort of difference between an American audience and collectors and institutions that might be more familiar with Ming's work versus collectors and audiences in the UK.
So Pippi and I both came to Ming's work in the same way, which was at the 2017 show that Arthur Jafer had at the Serpentine. I hadn't been very familiar with Ming's work, but Daughters of the Dust is ranks among one of my favorite films, and when I realized the influence that Ming had on it, I was just, fascinated, wanted to know more, and I know, although Pippi and I weren't working together then, that she had a similar feeling. So sort of the recognition from the gallery started around 2017, and then sometime later, after, a lot of Karen's amazing work with showing Ming at fairs, at Miami, in fact, Pippi was talking to a mutual friend of hers and Ming's on the booth, and said how wonderful it would be if, she could meet Ming, and it ended up with Pippi flying directly from the fair to see Ming in New York, and that was sort of the beginning of things, as I understand it. Then, many more visits ensued to Ming's studio, looking through prints, figuring out how Pippi Holdsworth Gallery would present Ming's work, and how it would be targeted to a UK audience who may be less familiar with her, as we had both been. The intention was to have Ming's first solo show with the gallery in 2020, and we all know what happened next. So it ended up being pivoted to an online viewing room, and Ming had her first in-person show with the gallery in April this year, which was fantastically received. There was a wonderful conversation between Ming and Hans Ulrich Obrist at the gallery, which I think, speaking of how British audiences would receive the work, Hans Ulrich is such a pioneer in his presentation of artists and his advocacy for them, and kind of positioning Ming within kind of Hans Ulrich's orbit really helped to establish her importance and kind of create a context and a framework for the reception of her work. In terms of where we focus our attentions, the gallery has a really strong focus on painting. So a lot of what we tend to show of Ming's work are painted photographs, which play with the blur in a different way. They look at the kind of obfuscation of an image, and sort of bring a sort of different dimension to that sort of long viewing and the sort of encapsulation of time that Ming's photography has, the expressive gesture of those works really fits in with our program and what we're known for. And yeah, like Karen, we also have a reputation for our partnerships and collaborations with museums and curators and have, focused greatly on bringing Ming into collections like Baltimore, like the Nasher. So.
Great, thank you. And so Nicola, I'm really curious. You opened your gallery last year, and your inaugural show was with Ming, which is quite a statement of choosing Ming as your first show. So just curious a little bit about how that collaboration came to be and that decision.
Yes, well, thanks, first of all, to our Basel Conversations, to you, Drew, to my colleagues who work with Ming, and of course, the great Ming herself, my hero. So my beginnings with Ming actually travel a bit farther back, and they began outside sort of traditional art world format. Where I first encountered Ming was on the dance floor at our dance school, and Joniba, and at the time I didn't realize that it was the Ming Smith who we've come to know, but for quite a few years I would be astounded by this very magical being and her facility for dance and movement and her beauty, and then a number of years later, I want to say it was about 2016, Sherry Bronfman, one of her closest friends, reconnected us at a presentation that I had worked on with one of my clients, Kasim Dean, Swiss Beats. And so that was when everything aligned. This is when I understood that this was the Ming Smith of Ming Smith lore. And at that stage, we actually began just a really great friendship, because at the time I was an art advisor. I had no sort of public platform. We lived nearby each other in Harlem, so we just bonded. We became girlfriends, frankly. And we would go for dinners, we would go to the park, and at a certain point, it was clear that the gallery needed to manifest. And Ming was really, I have to say, a driving factor behind it coming into being. She was the cocoon in which I laid so many of the ideas in the depths of the pandemic when there was no one to really connect with. And it wasn't even a decision, it was sort of a manifestation that she would be the inaugural show for the gallery, because she embodies so much of what the gallery strives for as a woman of color with great curiosity and adventure, and who tested the bounds of what was possible at the time when she was doing what she did. So for us, Ming really embodies the spirit of the gallery, so it was very easy for us to make the decision. And of course, in selecting the works that came forward for the show, we really went to that place that I think Ming referred to, the subconscious. I would dare say go farther back into the unconscious, that place where magic happens, Ming is really a magician. She is able to weave forms together. She's a painter of light. She understands how to take temperatures of atmosphere and people, and so we really wanted to go there. We wanted to go deep into her magical qualities. So that was the decision we made in terms of selecting the works. And, as happens when you are working with a master, people flock. So our work was cut out for us. People responded and understood immediately that she was worthy of such a title, with a great 20th and 21st century Masters of Photography.
Great, thank you. Well, now I want to ask a few more open questions. So not at any one of you, so I hope all of you feel free to jump in, and we've already touched upon it. And one is, I guess, sort of two. One would be, right, Karen, you mentioned vintage versus non-vintage, more contemporary prints, and all of you have worked sort of with both. So I'm curious about those choices. Ming, right? I mean, I think for so long, especially in the museum curator field, right, people preferred vintage, a print that was made around the same time as the negative. I don't think that holds true any longer, but I'd be curious to hear from you all in your experience. But I also think, right, Ming, like so many artists today that use photography, revisit older images and make new prints in the way that maybe you imagined making them around the same time you made the negative, or many artists just want to revisit their work. So I'm curious, yeah, and just your decisions in selecting vintage versus working with newer prints?
Should you answer?
I'll go first. Well, we looked at, in getting to know Ming and her body of work, I tend to look as a gallerist chronologically and through series. In speaking with Ming and Mingus, we primarily started focusing on what Ming feels are the most important bodies of work, and we started building out from that. So we started with her work having to do with New York and Harlem series, as well as her August Moon series. And this is very important because institutions are driving, for us, institutions are driving the demand for Ming's work. And the Getty bought 5 pieces from the August Moon series, and Ming and I had always spoke about doing a portfolio, and what you're seeing here is a portfolio of 12 images of what we feel is Ming's most iconic body of work. And so that is the first rollout for Ming's portfolios, is the August Moon work that she did in 1991, that she traveled to Pittsburgh, very much wanting to see the places that August Wilson included in his plays and playwrights that he did. So he did a play for every decade, I believe, of the 20th century. And so these are the characters and places that he visited. So that is really the soul and heart of Ming Smith's work, and everything else follows suit.
I don't know if either of you, I mean, I know you've also, I was just going back to your presentation, Nicola, a really beautiful installation of some images that are sort of iconic images that Ming has made over the years, but presented in a totally new way. So I'm curious about Ming, if you want to take this, or if you want Nicola.
I think this is a great way of seeing the paradox, in a sense, of Ming, because she was very adamant that the pictures be presented full bleed as a way of updating, giving it a much more contemporary and immersive feeling, as if you would step into the sort of photographic plane. So I thought that was a very successful way of bringing completely fresh energy to images that had, kind of lived through the decades. And, much like Karen said, we are so lucky because there are many institutions who now find themselves wanting to close the gap on the narrative that she fulfills in the history of photography. So she's got a number of wonderful museum exhibitions coming up, and so this is really a testament to the work being more visible within the context of scholarship and the art viewing publics in different regions in America. And then, of course, looking towards legacy, the legacy of Ming's work as it persists through the ages. So, we think about really establishing with her the tempo, what she wants to reveal at any given point. It really is, Ming is a very autonomous being, right? She is very clear on her thresholds and what she wants to sort of give to the world, and we have to abide by that. And so, this sense that you understand that there is staggering depth that you haven't even touched yet, right? And so, obviously, in the context of the museum shows that are coming up, we expect a lot of more visibility on that work. And but with our show, we had contemporary prints, we had vintage prints, and it was really just a view into this fantastic voyeuristic sense of wonder. I think about Ming, I think about Diana Vreeland's, the term she coined, that the eye has to travel, Ming is really the embodiment of that, and yeah, so we follow her lead and hope the world catches up.
Georgia, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I'll say something. So like Nicola, like Karen, we show a combination of vintage modern prints. Ming's exhibition, A Dream Deferred, at the gallery, focused a little bit on, there were a lot of works in that show from her Invisible Man series. Yes, since then, at fairs, as I said, we've tended to show painted prints. It is, you know, as I was saying, the show was something of a survey to show the breadth of Ming's practice and her, the range of the work she's produced over the years. There is so much, I think, that people hadn't seen, especially in the UK. And our intention was to introduce Ming's work as broadly as we could, which meant showing, you know, work from across her career. Yeah, I think that's probably about right.
Can I answer something? Well, Ming is having her a solo exhibition at Museum of Modern Art February 4th through May 29th, which is huge. Then she's having another solo exhibition at the Contemporary Museum of Art Houston, and there's another exhibition that's planned in 2024 at an institution. And this is, again, very important to the marketability of Ming, to collectors, private collectors. The vintage work, if I didn't emphasize that, the museums are collecting. What I am finding is Ming is the first Black woman photographer collected by the Museum of Modern Art. It was at 1979 or 76, somewhere around there. So in that time, photography was not seen as an art form, as Ming said. Today, when I started working with Ming in 2019, we took Ming's prices from $10,000 to $16,000. Now her work is primarily, I would say, $30,000 to $150,000. And for photography, that's extremely well. Roy de Carava's work starts at about $60,000 and goes on up. So Ming, we have now placed Ming where I feel she should be. We continue to push. I, as a Black gallerist, demand that Ming gets the respect that she deserves as the artist that she is. If the institutions do not want to pay it, we do not sell it to them. We just say, over and next. And what that says is you are going to give her the respect, and this is a dollar amount. We rarely discount Ming's work. We might do a 5 to 10% concession, maybe a little bit more, maybe for an institution. And Drew and I went through this too as well in the beginning. And this is adamant. I'm adamant about this. And I am not a gallerist to say, oh, let's go over here and talk in the corner and do something privately. No. So this is what I'm encouraging the other dealers to do as well. This is the only way we are going to uphold her marketability and sustain it. We are going into a downturn and we have high inflation. Just because you're a collector and you have a huge collection, congratulations, that's nice. But Ming Smith has 6 decades of working. And this is art labor, as another gallerist that I work with says. It's art labor. And it's also, as a Black gallerist, Black people, we have over 400 years of enslavement. Time's up, folks. So Ming Smith is going to be getting the respect she deserves. And you will be seeing that coming forward. And when you go to buy her work, just respect that and respect that you're getting a slice of also Americana through the lens of a person who sees the world, I think, through an idyllic and wonderful, warm perspective lens.
Exactly, yeah. Well, since you brought up the shows, maybe, Ming, I don't know if you can give us a little bit of preview how you've approached those shows and what, I mean, obviously you can't really give anything, too many details, I'm sure, but yeah, just working on a number of institutional shows, what that looks like for you in terms of, is it newer work, or are you similarly revisiting your own archive from over the years?
Well, actually, maybe 20% of my work has been shown. It's out. I'm in a planning show for Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, which I grew up in Ohio, and when my father would go to the Museum of Columbus, and so there's a body of work on just Ohio. There's a series that no one's ever seen. They could hear me. I have bodies of work, like I have this series. My father is a jazz musician, and it deals with jazz, a lot of loft jazz musicians, but it also shows jazz, another side of jazz. Like we have a stereotype of, say, jazz musicians, and in our mind, Miles Davis, but when Mingus, my son, was young, I used to take him. We used to be on the road, so I photographed that experience, not a stereotype of what a jazz musician, like families would travel. And when a Japanese person first saw a young black baby, everyone ran to see. They said, "Black baby, black baby." But I photographed like any photographer, as an artist. But I also have the black experience and from an inside. So I have that work. When I was in California, I did a lot of nature things, and one thing I'm thinking of that I haven't ever really shown is putting together of my, I have films like color, and I have a beautiful body of work, and that's what I've been working on lately. Just it's more surreal in color, and everyone says, "Oh, you should show this." So I'm working on that. I have, let's see, just my surreal period called Queen Mary that I shot in California. But just have a lot of work, and I'm still painting on my photographs. Like Pippi, one thing about their gallery, they had to fight to get the painted photographs where I put paint on photographs. And they loved it. London, people from England, they took it. They really, really loved them. So now all she wants is painted photographs. They're like, "Do you have any painted photographs?" That I won't let go. I kind of few of them, because a lot of the pieces that I have are, like my babies. It's like, I've lived with this work since the 70s, and I've had portfolios, and I did the work out of the love of photography, of a love of being an artist, like a painter paints. I didn't, it wasn't like, oh, I could sell this, or it'd be, the Brooklyn Museum would like this, or this series, or it would fit in any way. I really worked for myself, and I did it because I love doing photography, and I love, the artists that were photographers, like Lisette Modell was a friend of mine who was the teacher of Dion Arbus. She was a friend in the village, so I had, and I met Versailles, which I loved Versailles' work. So I was in it. This is just not something that I did to sell. So giving up this piece, and maybe it was only one piece, it's not easy for me to do that. It's like letting one of my children walk out the door, So it's all the emotional things. There's some people here from the Ohio folks. So I'm working on that now, like, my childhood memories in Ohio State, and it's different from, let's say, the that series is different because it's more about like real Ohio. It's not like Harlem, you know, just black people and the relationship to environment and the times. But this is like where, you know, white and black people, you know, they were together. You know, we lived in that way, like the Ohio State Fair. You know, we lived. For example, I want to be more specific. Like I took photographs of square dancing, which was, and so that's very American. You know, that's a period of time. I don't know if they still do that, but in Ohio, and it was. I photographed it because it was dance. It wasn't just, you know, I have a body of series of work that's just on dance and Katherine Dunham. But I love dance, you know, and so that square dancing is very American, just like Tide soap. I don't know if they have Tide soap or Ivory soap or Ford's cars. Seems so antiquated now.
Well, I'm looking forward to all those upcoming shows. You're very busy, as you deserve to be.
I was just going to add to, you know, what Ming was saying, is that's the beauty for all of us as dealers here, working with artists who actually were operating from a place of absolute artistic integrity and purity. They weren't trying to fulfill any need of necessarily markets or what the viewership wanted. And it's an extraordinary difference in caliber and just what's revealed when you go through decades of work that comes from true experimentation, innovation, heart, soul, spirit, you know, which, you know, Ming is deeply inclined to all those things. And you know, so we're really lucky, as Karen said, to be able to touch this work, and as Ming said, for her to release them into the world like her children. So it's very unique for us as dealers to be able to interact with work of this, you know, kind of stratospheric quality.
Yeah, and on that note, I think all of us take our responsibility as the sort of outsourcers of the custodians for Ming's work very, very seriously. You know, as Karen said, it is the museums who are currently leading the collecting and the driving the market in that way. But of course, there are private collectors who are very, very interested in Ming, and it's so important that the places that the people we are placing the works with feel that integrity, have integrity themselves, and bear a responsibility for the ownership of Ming's work. And you know, I think really good collectors understand that they never own a work; they just take care of it, you know. And there's a responsibility as a collector to, you know, building that legacy as well.
Thank you. I want to now open it up to the audience if anyone has questions. Someone will come around with the microphone.
Good morning, and thank you all for sharing your insights, and thank you for championing Ming's work. And Ming, I grew up in Newark, Ohio, outside of Columbus, Ohio, so I look forward to seeing that series. But I have a question in terms of photography and edition sizes, because it's photography. How do you determine, you know, the size in terms of investing in Ming's work, and what the edition size, or, you know, the artist proof, sort of what should be sort of the strategy in terms of acquiring?
Less is more. Especially when you start talking with institutions and photography collectors in general, they are very shy of high edition numbers. So when we rolled out Ming's work editions back in 2019, we started with a set size of editions of 10 for a certain size, and then we went to 7 for just next step up, and then we went to 5. And we're trying to hold it at that. Yeah.
That's where we landed as well. We sort of picked up where Karen left off, and we began all our editions at 5 plus 2 APs.
Same.
Thank you, Denise.
Hi, Ming. I've got a question from our audiences on Facebook. So someone's asking, reflecting back on your rich career and your history, what would your advice be for a young artist starting today?
To work from themselves and enjoy and take care of themselves. I think, you know, like I'm concerned with my diet and just everyday surviving in the times. I think it's very stressful. It's funny because, you know, just really work from yourself and do it. I met Pippi the day before they had lockdown, okay? And then the day they opened up, I had my show. So I was working, and many times the work will help you through stressful times. So if you work and you have a need to do it, it can get you through. I also did my book from Aperture during the pandemic. So I was working during that period of time.
A beautiful
Yeah.
book.
Excuse my ignorance, but can you fill me in more about, I know you're selling originals to museums and things like that, but what are, do you keep any of the rights to print those yourself, or how does that process work?
Well, we're working on the legacy now, unfortunately. You know, it's things you have to deal with, death and afterwards, and so I don't know.
Ming retains all copyright to her work, and all the copyright laws in the United States apply. Yeah.
But there are instances, of course, when there's sort of a licensing. For example, when we did, right on the heels of opening the gallery, we did this extraordinary collaboration with Jordan and with Michael Jordan and the women of the NBA who Jordan had signed. And so that was a really interesting way of bringing Ming as the figure that she is in popular culture, in artistic culture, and, you know, co-signing it with sports culture, the wider culture, and obviously a great like Michael Jordan. And so that is a unique experience in which Ming's work is sort of has a kind of licensing attached to it,
Yeah.
right?
And films, there's
Exactly.
I get
and the
calls. They're
films,
doing
yes.
a film, you know, during the modeling industry. I had a picture of Beth Ann. And a lot of different films, licensed individual photographs.
Thank you for being here. What is the best way for a young photographer to approach a gallery or dealer?
Don't. No, it's much easier if a gallerist finds the artist. What I would really say is kind of foster networks of other artists, because word travels well through artist networks, and they always get to the dealers.
I would advise you first, before you approach a gallery, is to, in all honesty, search your heart and look on the website and look and see what program that gallery has. And if you truly fit into that program, and if you truly fit at the level in which those artists are working, then you might be able to engage in a conversation through an introduction through another artist or friend. But don't be discouraged. But there is a process. But whatever you do not come up to an art fair wanting to show your work, because we will never forget that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think what Karen says about finding the correct context is really, really important. You know, not every gallery can do the best for an artist just because they are a successful commercial setup or have, you know, great curatorial connections. If you as an artist don't fit into a gallery program, there's not so much a gallery can do for you, and it's just so important. I think that's why galleries tend to reach out to artists and to do their own research and to bring artists in of their own steam, because we know where our strengths lie and we know who we can support and advocate for in the best possible way.
Great. Well, if that's it, I just want to say thank you again to Ming and all the panelists today, and of course Art Basel Conversations for hosting this, and all of you for coming.
We have about 6 or 7 vintage prints up at booth G8 of Ming, along with we're just releasing one of her collage works, a self-portrait, which is quite lovely. So come and see us. We're happy to chat with you about Ming's work today.
Yeah, we'll also be presenting Ming's work. So, you know, we're doing a solo presentation of Ming's work at Frieze Los Angeles in 2023. So visit us there.
And we also have work by Ming up on booth D15, some of the painted prints that we have been discussing, and also a beautiful work from Ming's Coney Island images. So yeah, please do come and see us as well.